everyone, and welcome to this next episode of the Around the Ballpark podcast. My name is Mike Redman. I am your host alongside my brother, Darren Redman. And today we got something special for you. Today, although we are primarily a baseball podcast, we love to have some special guests on as well and kind of just on our way to the next ballpark, have some fun conversations. And today we're going to talk Seinfeld. And along to do that with us, we have Mike as well. We're going to kind of introduce him shortly, but before we do that, Darren, if you wouldn't mind sharing a word with our listeners.
Yeah, attention Palm Bay and everybody else, really. I mean, if you got tax troubles, and nowadays, really, who doesn't, unfortunately, or somebody that does, Nashville Tax Solutions has got you covered. Whether you're behind on returns, you forgot to file, you're facing a lien, or you just need some expert advice because you forgot something that's probably very important. Their team is ready to help. Hear what clients say. Chris Bennett and his team saved many from a financial nightmare. They're knowledgeable, they're clear, they're compassionate, and they realize that tax problems are not template forms. Everyone is unique, everyone is different. So don't let taxes stress you out. Reach out to Nashville Tax Solutions today. Call 615-502-2250 or visit NashvilleTaxSolutions.com, or you just want to email because you don't want to talk to anybody, a little intimidated. Go to info@NashvilleTaxSolutions.com. Nashville Tax Solutions, where tax resolution is achieved.
Thank you, Darren. And as we mentioned before on the podcast, Chris Bennett is a near and dear friend of mine as well. We've had him on as a podcast as well, and he had some exciting stories to share, including being a bat boy for the Dodgers, been there in Vero Beach. So super excited that he is partnering alongside with us, and we really appreciate him and everything that they do. So please definitely reach out to them. They will put you at ease. Obviously mentioned before, talking about taxes, not always ideal, but him and his team couldn't be any nicer. We'll put you at ease with that. So with that said, thank you again, Chris. But we also have today, we have Mike on. And Mike, if you wouldn't kind of mind sharing a little bit about yourself and what you do, and we'll get started.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it. This is always fun to talk about one of my favorite topics of all time, which is the show Seinfeld. But I also am a big baseball fan, so I think that things will blend together nicely here and have a nice conversation. But my Seinfeld fandom has grown since I was 14 years old and first started watching the show till now. I'm 45 years old, and I run a account on Twitter, or X, known as Seinfeld Scholars. We do episode brackets and some other fun projects related to the show. So that's kind of where my background falls in when we're talking about Seinfeld.
That's awesome. And I'm already kind of planning, okay, after this podcast over, I'm a little hungry, but I feel like I want to fill out a bracket now. That sounds really exciting. So definitely piqued my interest for sure with that. But thank you for coming on. We're going to have a lot of fun kind of diving into that. And you mentioned you are a baseball fan as well. Which team do you prefer the most?
I am a Minnesota Twins fan. I grew up in Northwest Minnesota.
Oh. Awesome. Yep. We were fortunate. We had his name was Tony Voda. We had him on one of our earlier episodes. Couldn't be any nicer. Season ticket holder for the Minnesota Twins, ball collector as well as record collector, and hopefully we get to see him open invite. You mentioned next year, so hopefully I can make my way and check out that stadium. It'd be beautiful to do that. So.
Well, we got to ask Mike. I'm sorry, real quick. I got Mike Squid here. I'm just we got to ask, right, Mike? Target Field, your impressions. Talk about it.
Yeah, I really love Target Field. I spent my formative years attending games at the Hubert H. Humphrey Metrodome, which was obviously not a fantastic baseball stadium, although we still enjoyed going there. And obviously the Twins had some awesome success winning the 87 to 91 World Series in that ballpark. But yeah, Target Field, when it opened, kind of blew everyone's mind in that area just because it was just great touches, aesthetic touches, really kind of an interesting project location. It's on a really small footprint. They really had to go vertical with a lot of the stands in the outfield, and it has to have the shortest distance between the backstop and home plate in all of Major League Baseball. If you throw a wild pitch, you're not guaranteed to give up a run in that ballpark by any stretch. So they fit it in there beautifully. Yeah, just great park to attend. So me and the family, even though we are 4 hours away from the Twin Cities, we try to get to a game every year if we can.
Yeah.
Can I ask one question? Then you mentioned about what I think were the often overlooked great teams that the Twins had back then. If you can, your recollection, talk a little bit about Tom Kelly. Again, I love talking about managers. He was the right person for that job, wasn't he?
Absolutely. And it's you hear every once in a while these days, you see online people like put a photo of somebody who was whatever age at 30 years ago versus now, and they look so much older back then and stuff. And Tom Kelly didn't look like a super young guy when he was managing the 87 Twins, but he was still in his 30s then.
He looked older than me now. I mean, he looked old then.
Exactly. So no, TK was great. Everybody loves TK. I have a poster of TK in my office at work. Yeah, just I think he just connected with players on such a great level, and maybe the age thing probably helps a little bit with that, and the fact that he wasn't too far removed from his actual playing days. Not that he had many of major league playing days, but certainly in the minors. But yeah, he just, for whatever reason, he gelled with that team and got the absolute most out of them. I mean, when you look at that 87 team, they could hit home runs, but their pitching staff was a little thin. But they managed to get to the finish line. First team to win a World Series with the home team winning every single game, which they duplicated again 4 years later in '91. And it was, and then he also toward the tail end of his managing career, kind of was the guy at the helm when kind of they had their resurgence in the early 2000s with that group of young players before Ron Gardenhire took over in 2002.
Good pull. That's right.
Yeah,
forgot about that.
And the last thing, just mentioned Twins wise, and before we get to Seinfeld, just shout out again to Joe Mauer for his Hall of Fame induction. I know at first, you hear some names and you're not quite sure. And
there you go. There you go. That's right. There you
go. Amazing. Awesome. Didn't know that was going to happen, but that's cool. Yep. So excited for that. That's well deserved. So as we there's so much to kind of dissect here in the time that we have. So many episodes. Seinfeld is a show that has those that may not know, there's almost 20 episodes, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that are deep rooted in baseball. So I thought we would start one here off the bat. Sometimes sport fans, they kind of prioritize things a little bit different than everybody else, right? Me and in my home, it's supposed to be Jesus Christ first, your wife, then your kids, and then. But I feel like some fans kind of push that sport, and especially if a bad trade was made, that's like the worst thing, that kind of gets bumped up. And so with that said, talking about the Caddy episode, season 7, the infamous line, those that may not know, that episode was when George's car was damaged and there was blood showing and parked in Yankee Stadium, and George Steinbrenner assumed he was dead. And so they go to the parents' house to deliver the bad news. And then the infamous line of "What the hell did you trade Jay Buhner for?" From Frank Costanza was just one of those lines where you cannot not laugh. The line's coming. It's just you can't help yourself. So Mike, starting with you, that episode, what that episode means to you, and or where you kind of rank that on your end.
Yeah, and again, like you said, just kind of a throw-in thing, which who knows if it's Larry David or whoever in the writers' room that is saying, let's have Frank say this. But yeah, that's just a tremendous scene. Great use of Frank Costanza. You see every once in a while people refer to Frank Costanza being an underused character or Newman being an underused character, and how about maybe exactly properly used? And that's why they were so effective. And that sort of thing, to deliver that sort of line. You can't do that every single episode. You have to save them for those special occasions. Sort of like a reliever coming out of the bullpen at the right time in the game. You can't bring them in when you're down by 10 runs. So let's use them at the right time here. But yeah, Frank's line is great, but I mean Steinbrenner's retort is tremendous also. My baseball people love Ken Phelps' bat. They keep saying Ken Phelps, Ken Phelps. And it's just
yes,
you just
so good.
it's
So
just
good.
tough to beat writing like that. It's just unbelievable.
You can't.
Yeah. Now I have to ask Darren with you and Seinfeld in terms. So everybody kind of has the time on it. For me, that's the show where no matter what kind of day I had, that's the last thing that I put on the evening. I can't put anything on where like I have to pay attention, like when it's time to lay down and stuff. I can't put anything on too serious. Guys, put something on that it's gonna make me laugh, but just kind of just puts me at ease and stuff like that. And so I always go to Seinfeld just because even though I know the lines are coming, all that stuff, other stuff it may just kind of pull too much my attention. But so for me, that's when I watch it is nightly. Last thing I put on every night. So what about yourself, or how often now?
No, you hit it on the head. When Mike and I were pre-gaming a little bit, I mentioned that I can't rattle off all the lines I would love to, like I can with The Odd Couple. But I watch Seinfeld every night. Every night. So, I taught special ed. I work in running a residency, so I need to get up. I get up, I don't know, 3:30, 4 o'clock every morning. And the last thing I do before I put my head on the pillow, and then I listen to actually some documentary stuff, Ken Burns stuff, I watch Seinfeld, every night. And I gotta say, did you notice we recorded 2 podcasts today. We did one right before this. Did you see me do my Jerry Seinfeld, my favorite thing from Jerry?
Yes.
Yep. Right? I didn't use the line. Mike, you love this. I didn't use the line, but I did the body mannerisms. You're really good at taking the reservation. Anybody can do it. It's the it's the keeping of the reservation. That's the important part. You do a little work. So I remember I did that in our last episode. It's an every night. I mean, 7 days.
Definitely. So Mike, same season now, kind of shifting towards the episode called that I like to talk about next is called The Wink. So same season 7 as well, but this is the infamous episode, of course, where Kramer promises a child first just the 1 home run, but he wants 2 home runs, and the whole premise about how hard it is to get that home run signed, but he really wants that signed birthday card back, and so maybe those that may not be too familiar with that episode, or just kind of your thoughts on that, Mike, for those listening, that what that episode was about.
Yeah, and I just read a note about that episode recently where Paul O'Neill they were basically talking to Paul O'Neill about how that came to be, and I think they were playing the Angels in Anaheim or something like that at the time. So he basically just ran over and did this filming of the scenes with Kramer, and then got back and he said he had a terrible game the night, something along those lines. But even just getting those real life Yankee players involved, not just in that episode but other episodes, was just a stroke of genius, and just elevated it to a new place. But yeah, it really was tremendous, because that again goes to a writing situation. And okay, well, how far is pushing it too far, or how far do you need to push something? And to just ask for a home run would have been enough, you think, but no, it's 2 home runs, and that just gives it so much more flavor and so much more humor to the situation. And then to have it actually play out the way they did. Granted, you only get to hear the audio of the announcers, but for the first homer to play out, the second winding up being a triple with an error, unfortunately. So it wasn't good enough to get the framed card. Granted, Kramer could have just ripped it out of the kid's hands, but I guess he didn't want to go quite that route with it, which maybe was for the best. But yeah, just tremendous stuff, and Paul O'Neill did a great job for what he was required to do.
He did. And one thing I loved with that episode too was that. So I'm also coach a softball team, weekly and stuff. And teaching someone how to keep score is such a challenge, because even in softball, where you don't have to put F7 or if it's a fly out to left field or things like that, you still kind of have to know the basics. And so I love there that it doesn't count as a home run. Now, makes sense to me, makes sense to most, but trying to explain that, oh no, this is why it's not a home run. But they went all the way around, and it's just trying to navigate those waters, no, but this is why. And so a lot of times the stats at the end of the season, I know if I keep it, it's one way, but I'll look at it and I'm like, wait, you gave a fielder's choice to that guy for doing that, or you counted that as an error? That was clearly a base hit. He threw it into the next zip code, but you counted that as a single, you know. So I just that's why that episode hit home so much. Just that one line, especially just because I've been there. We've been that's what makes comedy so great sometimes, when you can relate to something and all relate it in different ways. So, but Darren, the next one I want to jump into, you'll know, Mike, myself, and Darren, long suffering Met fans, and so the Keith Hernandez obviously hits home to us. The Mets announcers are the best in the game, but that episode, or Keith Hernandez time on Seinfeld, just pure genius. I love the dialogue when they're in the vehicle and he's like talking to himself, go ahead and kiss her, you know, I was the MVP of 1979, you know. I love that he didn't even have to say the words. Just that was pure genius. So thoughts on that episode, Dan?
I didn't say it. No, I'm kidding. So no, I am Keith Hernandez. You know, and what I loved was, I mean, we could talk second spitter all day, Ron Darling coming out, but the brilliance of the writing of Larry David and Jerry Seinfeld, and the way it really was the episode about, how dare you ask me to help you move? It doesn't even matter that you Keith Hernandez. He asked you to move, help him move. That's a big step. I'm not ready to do that, you know. But it's a classic. It's baseball. It's Newman going, you know, just and Kramer and, you know, Keith Hernandez, you know, who just retired 2 years from the Indians, they were called at the time, and but it was just a brilliant. Again, it was pure brilliance. It was very, very New York, very real. You know, I mean. Would you say no if somebody you idolized asked you to help them move? No, but it just shows how indignant these people were, you know, that we all fell in love with. You know, Seinfeld, it was, you know, it was.
Yep. But to him, taking him to the airport, that was crossing the line. They forget that was never going to happen. But
that was it. That was it. Right. Yes. That too. Yes.
Yeah, because we can relate. Like, oh wait, you made plans with me on that night, and now there's a woman involved, and all of a sudden I'm pushed to the side. So I loved how he called him to say, "Hey, I'm sorry that I did this," and you know, thought that was awesome because we've all been there. We all know that. So, have to talk about one of the ones that's still like, so a lot of times, even if the wife falls asleep first, I'm trying to not like laugh hysterically, even though I know the lines are going to come. But there's certain episodes I just can't help it, and the Bodysuit Man episode, or the Millennium, I should say. Bodysuit Man, anything that George could do to get release for the Yankees to go to the Mets, from the wiping the jelly to the bodysuit to just all that, just man, so good. So Mike, on that, what is your recollection on that episode in terms of where you think that stands in the realm of episodes, in terms of, you know, for me, it's start to finish, that was one of the best.
Well, I mean, that one's kind of like the beginning of the end of George's Yankees career, essentially. You know, it was kind of, they must have decided, okay, we're gonna put a bow on George as a member of the Yankee organization, sort of thing. So it almost makes you wonder, how many jokes did they have kind of in their back pocket about what to do with the Yankees, and it's time to get them all out there. So let's talk about Babe Ruth having little girl legs, and let's you know, smear strawberries all over his uniform, do all these things, and you know, dismantle the World Series trophy, whatever the case may be. But yeah, it was kind of bittersweet, I guess, a little bit, in terms of, okay, this is George actively trying to destroy this window of success he's had for, you know, almost 4 seasons at that point. And I guess we're going to move on to something else. And then, of course, you know, being tempted by the Mets for whatever reason, you know, he had a perfectly good job. You know, it's kind of typical George self-sabotage.
Yep.
So it's almost like a part 1, part 2, because then the very next episode in the Muffin Tops, he gets traded to Tyler Chicken for the fermented alcoholic chicken drinks, and that seals his Yankees fate for good. So. Yeah, but the Millennium itself, yeah, was was one of those episodes that bothers me actually at the end of it. And I know I had some discourse with somebody on X recently about it. There's this bizarre Jerry line at the end where he's telling Newman basically that his party is poorly planned because it's a year late or something like that, but it should have actually been a year early. So we won't get too far off the rails into that part, but that episode as a whole kind of
That's
just
good point. Yeah, definitely. And I kind of related to I have watched The Office, but not nowhere near. It's not in my top 10 anything. But kind of in a way, we look at George Costanza's Yankee run as the same way we do as anyone on the staff on The Office. Like, really didn't get anything done. Let's be honest. For the entire day.
That's a great observation.
Yeah, it's pretty much. So Darren, or Mike, I should say. Darren mentioned we had recorded one other podcast today. It was actually a diehard Baltimore Oriole fan, and so that took me back while we were having that conversation about the episode with Elaine's hat, right? So kind of diving in the episode a little bit, but just then a generalized question as well. But so those that know that episode may not know it by title. This is the episode where Elaine goes to the games wearing the Yankee hat, sitting second row, not front row, although really wanted to be front row, and she's asked to take that off, and a whole mess ensues. So kind of starting Mike into that a little bit, and then Darren as well, and from the aspect of, I had just been to Boston recently. Tampa Bay Rays fan, my wife was, so I went with, and there was no animosity at all or anything like that. But in terms of when it's okay, when it's not okay, is it just the rivalry? Obviously we don't show up to Fenway with the Yankee hat on or anything like that. But just talk about that, Darren, a little bit after Mike, and just in terms of that is what's okay, what's not okay. Is it anything's okay as long as you're not obnoxious? Kind of dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, I think both sides had a legitimate argument in this case. I think because it was the owner's box specifically, that's obviously why it became an issue. If she's sitting 5 rows back, it's nobody cares, right? But because it's a special favor and it's the owner's box, it becomes an issue, which again is another one of these great details, because it could have been that Jerry's girlfriend has a dad who is not an accountant for the Yankees. He is whatever, and he just has good seats, and then in that case, there's no problem. But no, it's the owner's box. So now we've got the proper amount of conflict where you can actually kind of see both sides of the issue a little bit. And it kind of works a little better. But yeah, I think in general, if you show up at a baseball game wearing the opposing team's cap, it's not a problem at all. I was just in the game in Seattle a week ago, wearing my Twins gear, wearing the same jersey I'm wearing right now. So, everything was friendly. Granted, that's Seattle, not Philadelphia or any place like that. So, but it's a great episode. In fact, I'm just going to make one other quick note. We have a little project going on X right now through our account where we're examining the episode titles of every single episode to say, was this the best episode or was there an alternative that would have been better? That just happened to be the episode we did yesterday. So the letter won the vote. It kept its title. It beat out an alternative title of The Portrait by a slight percentage. So it's stayed as the letter.
Well, I'll tell you, I think there's another episode, and I don't know the name of the episode, but that really speaks to your question, Mike, and that is when Elaine's boyfriend, the Devil fan, paints his face. You cannot go to a visiting arena/stadium and paint your face. Do we all agree with that?
Yeah, I think that would be the line. That's take an Uber, you're not riding with me, and you're not sitting with me.
Or take your shirt off. That's
just also playoffs. You gotta let them know you're out there.
Yeah, not that way. You wear your hat, you wear your gear, and you just sit there and clap, and don't paint your face. Thank you. That's all I'm saying. Oh, and which reminds me of Elaine had some of the greatest lines with boyfriends. I mean, the best. I'm doctor. Well, you're a podiatrist. Yeah. It's just she had a way of just knocking people down.
Yeah, I know it. I saw a thing one time, but it's true. Like, you compare those of you that are Friends fans as well, you kind of compare Elaine's dating record with Phoebe's dating records, and it's just like it's just this conglomerate list of names. So we could of course talk all day about baseball related episodes, but let's since we with the time we have left, kind of just dive into just a couple other things, just the characters in general. So starting with Kramer, to me, he is part of the best scene of the entire series. Cannot not watch this particular scene 5 times every single time. I'm referring to, of course, the Rooster episode where the scene when he opens the door, the red light comes through, and he just kind of like falls backwards, and just I can't not real tears come out to this day, and I've seen it 50 times. But so speaking with Kramer, Mike, you first as well, in terms of what he meant to the show, and just because it's interesting, those that may not know, if I'm mistaken, correct me, because the whole his entrance into the apartment each time, they actually eventually didn't they ask the audience to stop clapping at some point because of distraction. But yeah, so if you could talk a little bit about Kramer, what he meant to the show, and then your top Kramer moment, since I shared mine with that.
Sure. Well, an interesting character. I don't know if I want to call it a character arc, because this was a show where characters didn't really show any growth or any sort of thing like that. But in terms of how you utilize the character as a writer's room or a director and that sort of thing. I mean, very kind of odd guy in the early episodes. Like, why would you even let this guy in your apartment? What's going on here? Versus a guy that, oh, well, if he shows up, he shows up. But obviously great physical comedian. Michael Richards, just unbelievable performance throughout the series from that aspect, but not just physical comedy. I mean, the way he delivered lines, the way he brought life to different scenes in ways that you wouldn't think about it. I've seen different things from Jerry where talking about how Michael's off there obviously working on something or figuring out how exactly he's gonna add some physical element to a scene that they didn't know it was going to happen exactly quite until it happened. And you've obviously seen the bloopers too, with everybody kind of cracking and breaking and having a hard time keeping themselves together. But Kramer, I think, kind of speaks for himself. Best Kramer scene for me, I think, is in the sniffing account when he drinks the beer and smokes a cigarette. Here's to feeling good all the time, and pours that thing back. And if you give me a little bit more time, maybe I'd think of something else, but that's the one that comes
off
to
the
mind.
cuff. No, that's really good off the cuff. That's really good, right up there.
So with me, there's a tie and a quick backstory. Yes, I mean, because Kramer was based on somebody named Kramer, who lived in the apartment that Larry David lived in, who never left. And what people don't realize is these characters, and we'll talk about some others in a second, they changed a lot, over the course of the seasons, but yet not at all, which is like us. You don't notice the changes. But to me, by far, is a tie. And I'm laughing now. Cleaning the vegetables while taking a shower. How do you find the time? Well, I'm cleaning the vegetables while taking a shower. That, and when the scene with Jerry, when he starts to go to work, Kramer goes to work, and they kind of act like a married couple. He goes, how tough it is at work? I'm swamped. Jerry's like, you worked there 3 days. He goes, I don't even work here. Just classic. That's
so good.
Yep. Though the Merv Griffin episode's right up there too, when he has the set of Merv Griffin show.
Oh, fantastic. And I love how he spun oh, that animal shouldn't be around that one. Let's see what happens. So good. You talk about character development. Kind of wanted to jump here to Newman. Let's talk about Newman for a minute. So obviously those early on, a couple episodes, Newman calling, he wants to jump again. He winds up jumping from the second story and whatnot. But he was used so well. Like, he wasn't used all the time, but every single time it was spot on, whether it was him giving advice on what to do with Elaine's the barking dog, or just in general, just so many. But I really think they used him just enough where it wasn't overbearing, and every time he made it work. So your thoughts on Newman and his impact, because we always think the big four, but he was just as important as the rest of the cast.
Yeah. You mentioned his first entrance into the show wasn't even Wayne Knight. It was the voice of Larry David yelling from the roof that he was going to jump. Then later they dubbed in Wayne Knight's voice for syndication. So Wayne Knight comes aboard, and he's got some great moments, including we talked about the boyfriend, the Keith Hernandez episode. I mean, that's really like Newman's actual arrival, right?
Yes.
Like that's where Newman like really comes into the show. It's like, oh my goodness. I mean, and for all I know, that's exactly what they saw too. Like, oh my goodness, what a performance by this guy in this episode, Keith Hernandez, and just and take it off from there. And like, boy, we can really use this guy in some different ways. But there's just the subtle things too that Wayne Knight brought to that role. So when he shows up to tell Mr. and Mrs. Seinfeld about Jerry making out during Schindler's List. Okay, so he wanders into that apartment, and they have, of course, the great moment where, "Hello, Mrs. Seinfeld." And she's like, "Hello, Newman," just like Jerry would say.
Yeah.
Well, Newman wanders into that scene. If you pay attention to that scene, he like picks up, I don't know if it's a piece of hard candy or what it is, off of Jerry's counter, smells it, and then like stuffs it in his pocket for later. And it's just those sorts of things. It's like, what in the world? How are these guys this talented or so smart and figuring out these things to add to these characters? But yeah, I think you pegged it. We talked about a little bit before. Newman used just the right amount. And then the other thing that they kind of figured out was the kind of Kramer Newman buddy pairing sort of thing, where these guys can go off and have wacky adventures, and it makes it feel more realistic that Kramer's doing these weird things when he's actually got somebody else who's on board with it.
Yeah, well said. One thing want to chat about too, I found interesting. So wife was having a big 40th birthday celebration. I've always heard about Cameo, right? And I was like, oh, let me see, because she's a big fan of Shinedown. I don't know if you're familiar with them. So I was kind of doing some research, seeing if they're on there, and unfortunately they weren't and stuff. But who was on there was Larry Thomas, and this is the infamous "No Soup for You," and he's still getting pretty significant amount of money per appearance on Cameo. And I'm sure that's not the only thing he did. Like, definitely there was other things he did, of course. But talk about just the impact of such a small, we think about sometimes, like when I think about some smaller lines on the show, like "These pretzels are making me thirsty," but the "No soup for you" still said to this day, like, I can't not have soup and not hear that in the back of my head. Maybe it's because I watched episodes so many times. But are any familiarity with any of other of Larry Thomas's work on your end, or is that really your extent?
Well, that's certainly the thing I most know him for. I believe he also played in the first Austin Powers movie. He played like the blackjack dealer who suggested that I suggest you stay, sir, or no, suggest you hit, because Austin only had like a 2 and a 3. He says, "I'll stay. I suggest you hit, sir." So I think outside of that, I think that kind of taps me out on Larry Thomas. But two pretty memorable roles for me anyway.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And we have to, I know we with time and stuff, so want to kind of just a couple more things. We have to talk about, of course, George Costanza. You can't not just start to finish. For me, he's the guy, but and Kramer as well. But with George, it's hard to kind of just narrow down to just a few. But just the way he delivers, it's not just the lines, it's the way he delivers the lines. Right off the bat, when we're meeting Elaine's father for the first time, he's in the bathroom. Just the bathroom, so good. The voicemail that he left with the leave a message at the beep. He's trying to ignore this person until he can bring her to the ball and all that kind of stuff. So Darren, your thoughts on George Costanza, his character in general, and what episodes or what moments stand out for you with George?
I think with him, he is the epitome of what I was talking about earlier about character development. Because when we first see him in the Seinfeld Chronicles, he's basically just Woody Allen, and trying to be kind of nebbish, and it wasn't until like end of the second season that you realize he's just Larry David. He's supposed to be Larry David, a lot outwardly doing that. And I think he really hit his stride with 2 words: Vandalay Industries. And from there you go. Beautiful. And listen, I mean, you can just like, look, first of all, the words, right? The vernacular, yada, 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 this and that, master the domain. But, you know, the sea was mighty, my friends, you know, but really you think about it, he said it all. He was the one that would say these, you know, sometimes he didn't have to say words. Just the best. He was, I mean, I'm a big Jerry Seinfeld guy, but he's right up there. I mean, those two are perfect together. Just the best.
And
Yeah,
Mike, your thoughts as well in terms of, you know, you talked earlier about bracketology and whatnot. So what would be a good teaser for those that may be interested to kind of dive into that in terms of the George Costanza episode that would be high, would make it far in that bracketology?
Right. And well, I'm going to talk about the episode The Opposite when we're talking about that, because it's an episode that did very well in our big bracket. So the big anniversary bracket that we did last year included every single episode. So it wasn't like the top 64 or top 96 or 128. It was we had all of them included. And our final wound up being the contest over the marine biologist by just 5 votes in a 1,500 vote final. So it was this great finish, but The Opposite lost out to the contest a few rounds before that. But The Opposite to me is the George Costanza episode for all George Costanza episodes. Just this realization that nothing is working. It's all over for him. When did it go wrong? All these sorts of things. And Jerry just suggesting to him, well, if every instinct you have is wrong, then the opposite would have to be right. And of course, that launched his Yankees career, as it turned out. You know, that led to the job interview, that led to Steinbrenner hiring him, and it led to a lot more baseball in Seinfeld. That's really, to me, the George episode where you kind of see all sides of George's personality, the successful, the non-successful, and let's just try something because why the heck not?
So I got to jump in with Costanza. 3 famous words. It's 4 words actually. It's either it's a drain or it's just a drain, right? I mean, when he got thrown out of the gym, right? If you've seen that episode, that is because I don't know about you all, and I want to keep it, you know, GPG here, but I've seen people do that, and that's always their explanation, you know. and
It's all pipes.
Exactly right. It's all pipes, and then everybody likes to talk about the master domain, right? But I think that the female version of that was actually funnier. She tapped out, Jerry. She had me tap out. And Jerry's like, yeah, that's pretty bad. And last one with George was to get me something Jerry says. George, but Costanza shows up wearing sweatpants. He goes, "You've given up. You've just given up."
Yeah, you know, I think to the episode too is when George watched the documentary, and now I think he's like having a heart attack and his time is ending, and Jerry comes in and just has a field day. You know, oh, you know, this jacket, and Susan, do you mind if I give her a call, and just kill me now? And there was no hesitation. He just gets up, walks around, smiles, and just inserts pillow here, and then Elaine walks in. Of course, the rest is history. But there was just, it was beautiful. It was no hesitation at all.
But she had man hands.
Yes, yeah. I would love to see.
You can go all day. No question about it.
Yeah, I would love to see if there's a document that had every reason for a Jerry Seinfeld breakup. I would love to read that, just to see up, man hands, up this, up that. Who knows? I'm sure it exists somewhere. If not, it will work. So my last thing I have, and then Darren, if you want to finish it up after that. But in terms of question I have, the 2 episodes that seem to get the most discredited as the Puerto Rican episode and the finale itself. So I'm someone that tries to put a positive spin on things. So let's look at it from the positives perspective, because we know that the reasons why maybe those two weren't what they were. But could you find any positives in those two episodes, or do you really feel like that entire finale should have been done differently? I know they wanted to bring everybody back, but just kind of wrap that up for us.
Well, for me, it was wrapped up beautifully on Larry David show, Curb Your Enthusiasm. If you watch the last episode, Dave wrapped up Seinfeld. And Mike, I defer to you. What were your thoughts on that? Because I was going to ask you that question. Did you feel somehow vindicated with that ending of Curb Your Enthusiasm?
Well, I had said, I can't remember what the verbiage you used, the word vindicated. Maybe that word was used, but after that Curb finale aired, in terms of, okay, what did it really do in terms of its relationship to the Seinfeld finale? And certainly even, Jerry feels that it did do something like that. I mean, he said that very clearly in interviews recently, that, this is almost like this 25-year joke that needed to be paid off sort of thing. And for me personally, I actually really liked the finale.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the things I liked about it were that you couldn't just be one of those people who popped in only for the finale and have any sense of why this show was so funny and so good. Like when all the returning characters come back, that's purely for the fans, right? Okay, there's the Virgin, there's the Soup Nazi, there's Mr. Pitt, all these people. And so I like that element of it where it's like, nope, we're the club. We're the ones that this is for. And so I like that this is appealing to us. I didn't necessarily like the structure of the finale. And I particularly didn't think they needed to add like the flashbacks when the witnesses were on the stand. Because again, that was like, well, that's maybe giving a little context to people who don't need it. But overall, I enjoyed the finale and laughed a lot the night that it aired. But I did also enjoy the Curb finale, and I did enjoy that, Larry at least was addressing the criticism that's been out there for a very long time.
They both do this. It was great, I thought. But anyway, this is maybe, thinking too deeply, because I'm a big time culture nerd and a big fan of comedy, big fan of Charles Schultz. I love that Charles Schultz never let Charlie Brown kick that football. Even in the last episode of his comics, he never let him kick the football, because and you got this same ending with Seinfeld. It was actually brilliant. These guys, you could put them in jail. They're still going to be selfish. They're still going to be about themselves. And they're still, still going to, even the last final joke. Didn't I say that before about the second button? I love it, because both geniuses, and I'm using that word and meaning it, was showing how this is life. You don't change. Lucy's never going to hold the football for you, but you're going to keep trying. You're going to put these guys in jail. They're still going to be selfish people. That's Seinfeld. It's great.
What I love too about that is with Kramer stands, like, kind of didn't even know where he, like, do you realize where we are? Like, didn't bother him a lot. Like, oh, we'll be out of here in no time. But like, sometimes you have somebody like myself. I remember a couple weeks back, we were driving back from a theme park and running out of gas, and I realized, okay, the gas station's about 20 miles away, and we got like 23 miles left in the tank. So I'm freaking out. Everybody else in the car, like, it's fine, it'll be okay, we'll get there, no worries, there's nothing we can do about it. And so I think to that finale, like, there's just, like you said, Darren, well said, like, there was no change in character there. They just, like, yep, this is where we are, it'll be fine, we'll be out in this time, no big deal. Love that. And so I wasn't as big of a hater of the finale as others. Yeah, some things maybe done a little bit differently, but it was great to see some faces again and whatnot. And throughout the entire episode, I remember saying, oh, they got to bring, there he is. So I don't really think, was there anyone really left off there that was significant? I felt like they pretty much covered everybody.
No, I thought
they covered enough. I think, I mean,
yeah.
You got the idea. They could have brought back even more if they really wanted to, but no, they did the job properly. And I love some of the callbacks that were included throughout it. It probably was like a little too Jackie Childs heavy, because that's a guy who you've got in
Agreed.
little bits, and now you're asking him to like do a lot of heavy lifting for like 25 minutes of the episode, sort of thing. But then at the end, you get stuff like, Putty, don't wait for me. Like, all right, just kind of turns and leaves, and you got Frank Costanza yelling at Steinbrenner, "How could you give $12 million to Hideki Harabu?" and all these things. So it was. I all I can say is I laughed. I remember very clearly 26 years ago laughing a lot during that episode. So.
Yep. Well, Mike, it's been outstanding. We have to have not even a part 2. We have to have a part 3 and a part 2 because we haven't even, in my opinion, we haven't even scratched the surface yet. So, you'll be hearing from us definitely for the next season. Absolutely, if you'll have us, because so much fun, so much more to talk about. But I just want to give shout outs for repping the twin gear. That's awesome. And thank you for joining us here on the Around the Ballpark podcast. Until next time, we'll see you around the ballpark.